Fujifilm is a camera legend and one of the greatest names in photography. They made some of the world's greatest films. They made some of the most unique film cameras. They were an early pioneer in digital photography. Their earliest digital cameras, however, were collaborations with companies like Nikon. But take a look at that Fuji X name and remember it, for this will become the Fuji X. Their last pre-X series cameras, such as the Fuji S5 Pro, garnered the love and admiration of pros and enthusiasts alike for its excellent image quality and color reproduction, and helped to develop what we now know as the cult of Fuji. And while Fujifilm's cameras had a massive cult following, somehow, despite all their successes, Fujifilm's digital cameras, just like their film cameras, never developed that mass appeal. So it wasn't until the introduction of this model, the Fuji X100, that the sun finally rose on the mountain of Fujifilm. What is going down, you awesome war-torn photography geeks? It is Sam from CameraLegend.com, and we are back today. And today we'll be looking at an instant classic from Fujifilm, and that camera is the one and only, the original Fuji X100. Alright, now I've had this camera since 2011, and at that time I remember specifically saying to myself, Sam, you're not going to buy another camera. But the minute I saw this camera in the flesh, I said to myself, gotta have it. Gotta have it. Anyway, alright, so I got one in the summer of 2011, and one of the earliest reviews I remember on this camera was from a great photographer, a blogger by the name of Zach Arias, okay? And in his review, alright, which I can't seem to find now, but in his review, he stated, right, the opening line was, and I quote, and I hope I'm not mistaken, but it was, the Fuji X100 is the greatest digital camera ever made. And when I read that, I was like, wow. With all due respect to Zach Arias, I thought it was just like a headline-grabbing opener, you know, just something to grab the headlines. But looking back now, he may be right, you know. But just a little bit off topic, I had a friend who was talking to me some time ago about arrogant bloggers, and I said, what do you mean by that? And he says arrogant bloggers were some bloggers that he met who thought they were the shit, and they wouldn't give you the time of the day, they wouldn't talk to you. And all I could say is Zach Arias is not one of those arrogant bloggers, okay? I met Zach Arias at a Photo Plus in 2013, and he was more than generous with his time, conversed with me, talked with me, very personable. So all respect to Zach Arias, all right? Now getting back to his quote, the Fuji X100 is the greatest digital camera ever made. Now, you know, that's hard to quantify, but looking back at it, as far as Fujifilm is concerned, this camera, the X100, may well be the greatest digital camera that they ever made. Alright, so in this episode, we're going to be taking a look at some pros and cons of the original Fuji X100. I'm going to tell you what I like about it, what I don't like about it. But first, let's take a look at some sample photos from 10 years of the original Fuji X100. right? So right now, let's take a look at some pros and cons of the Fuji X100, the original Fuji X100, and later on I'm going to tell you whether or not it is worth it, all right, for you guys. Now, you know, I'm not really wanting to do the same kind of reviews that everybody else does because there's some great reviews on this camera already, but in the end, in the conclusion, based on all the specifics of this camera, I'm just guessing that it's just going to end up the same as everybody else's review. All right, so anyway, let's take a look at some pros and cons of the Fuji X100. All right, you lovely camera geeks. Well, let's take a look at this beautiful, beautiful, iconic camera from Fujifilm. And first, let's talk about the pros and what Fuji got right with this camera. Now, first of all, the looks. Right off the bat with this retro rangefinder look, you can imagine how in 2011 when this camera came to market, you can imagine how this thing was a huge hit, all right? Because in today's world, we're used to seeing these retro looking digital cameras, but back then there wasn't that many of them, so it was really something totally different for its time. So right off the bat, Fuji knocked it out of the park with this camera with the looks, okay? Now, in addition to the looks, the lens right here, which is a 23 millimeter f2 on an APS-C sensor, which is equivalent to a 35 f2, which is a great universal focal length, all right? Commonly used for street photography, but you can use it for almost anything. All right, let's get a little closer look at this. And that's a beautiful, beautiful lens. Just to give you an idea of the ergonomics of this camera. All right, so look at the top right here, a nice shutter speed dial. The shutter speed range is 1/4000th of a second, all the way down to bulb right there, okay? So I love these kind of cameras where the dials are right there and you can access them really nicely. Now, well, I have a little criticism about this, but I'll talk about that on the negatives, okay? So basically, let's talk about the pros again. And one of the greatest things with this camera is it has this hybrid optical viewfinder, OVF, and EVF, electronic viewfinder, and you can access them, you can switch them by clicking onto this self-timer looking thing. So you can choose between the OVF and the EVF just by clicking onto that, which is brilliant, right? The this camera was actually quite loved for its high ISO capabilities, and for high ISOs it goes all the way up to 12,800, right, which today's cameras easily surpass, but this is still pretty remarkable now. So anyway, for its time it was quite awesome, and it's still quite awesome actually. Now the build quality, it feels nice and solid, very nice and solid. One of my original complaints, and I'm going to show you this right now, one of my original complaints was that when I first felt it, I said, oh wow, this is great. It feels nice and solid, but at the same time it feels quite light. And believe it or not, because coming from an old school film thing, I didn't actually like the fact that it was that light. But now looking back, I actually value the lightness of this camera because it's easy to carry around, easy to take around anywhere, and it's a pleasure to bring around to use, especially now that I'm getting older, you know what I mean? Alright, so let's talk about some of the negatives of this camera. The biggest negative on this camera is the complaint of slow autofocus. So when it first came out, this camera was not only slow, but it was very sluggish. It would hunt a lot and things like that. And to Fuji's credit, they updated it with firmware updates that helped, you know, but it doesn't cure the fact that it's still pretty slow, especially compared to today's cameras. Despite my worrying about its slow autofocus or its hunting and things like that. When it came time to get the shots, this camera, 90% of the time, almost always got the shots. And I was actually quite surprised and pleasantly surprised at that. All right, so don't be too scared off by the reports of slow autofocus. It's actually quite decent. All right. Now another negative I found on this camera in the early days, which is this: the controls here, as great as they are, as ergonomically great as they are prone to being knocked out pretty quickly. Like especially this exposure compensation. Many times I put the camera in the camera bag, and when I pulled it out, it was already somewhere else, and I didn't even notice it until I took some shots. So just keep that in mind. This is just a minor thing, but keep that in mind. But other than that, I don't have too many negative things to say about this camera, because this is a great camera, especially at today's price. All right, so as far as image quality is concerned, I would say it is top notch. All right, it's a 12.3 megapixel sensor, an older sensor, but it delivers really beautiful color reproduction, great tonality, and like I said, it's even usable for high ISOs. What's that, 12,800, which is not a lot by today's standards, but it's still probably more than you need. All right, it's definitely more than what I need. Anyway, all right, so is it film-like? All right, which is what a lot of folks who come to this channel look for. Well, all I can say is, yeah, the camera itself is film-like. It looks film-like, right? It handles somewhat film-like. As far as the files are concerned, you know, I wouldn't say that they were inherently film-like. You can definitely coax some film-like images out of it, you know, with some processing and things like that. But I wouldn't say it's inherently film-like, like the Ricoh GR Digital Original that I reviewed. But the one thing that a lot of people forget is that there's nothing wrong with a beautiful digital image. Nothing wrong with it. All right, so, and this camera delivers beautiful digital images, all right, because it's a digital camera, all right. Anyway, yes, so image quality can be superb, and is it worth it for you in 2021 or 2022? Well, the prices are trending now between 300 to 350. Sometimes you can get them cheaper, sometimes it's a little bit more expensive, but for the price, 300 to 350, I definitely say, heck yeah. Heck yeah, it's worth it. All right. So this is, in my opinion, definitely one of the most important cameras that Fujifilm ever produced. In fact, for Fujifilm, the company itself, it may well be the most important camera that they ever produced, because this is the camera that opened the doors for them. In a biblical term, you might say, upon this rock, the Fuji digital empire was built. All right. So definitely an important camera and a true camera legend in every sense of the word. Alright, so thank you guys so much for watching. And if you have a Fuji X100 original, I would love to hear from you. Leave a comment down below. Don't forget to like this video if you found it useful. And if you're not already subscribed, don't forget to subscribe, because there are plenty more camera legends coming your way. Alright, so thank you guys once again so very much. And I will catch you guys next time on the cameralegend.com. And this one's for you, babe. YouTube channel.
cameralegend.com